Good day to you. This is Chuck Cameron from OCTV. The program is My Life, and today we have a real special treat. Jim Lehtola is here. We're at the studio, and it probably doesn't look like that for you, but we're at our OCTV studio, and I've just met potentially a new friend, Jim, and Jim's got quite a story to tell us. So we're going to talk to Jim a little bit about his life today on the program My Life. Jim, thanks for coming. Thanks for sitting with us for a while to talk about your life. Tell us a bit about what you're up to today, and then we'll crawl back to a long time ago and figure out how you got to be the man you are today. What you up to?
Well, right now I'm pretty much involved in the Northeast Oakland County Historical Society and the museum here in town.
Sure.
I've been retired from the Oakland County Sheriff's Office for over 16 years now. After I retired, I had worked a number of part-time jobs, including the ordinance enforcement officer for Oxford Township, and I retired from that about a year ago.
Okay. What did that involve, that job?
It was enforcement of the township ordinances, primarily the zoning ordinance.
Got it. Okay, good. So you're a local boy. You've been around for a while?
Since 1973.
Excellent. All right. Well, then let's take a step or two or 5 or 10 back. Tell us about your childhood. The goal, of course, is to figure out who influenced you, where'd you grow up, if you had any family. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what that was like.
I was born in the Upper Peninsula in Hancock, Michigan. At that time, my family lived in Chassell. My father was a businessman, owned a small business there in Chassell, was real involved in the community. He was a volunteer firefighter. He was a member of the Lions Club. They still have a strawberry festival there in Chassell, which they just had a few weeks ago. But my dad was involved in organizing that original strawberry festival in the late 40s. And he had been born and grew up on a farm just near town there.
Okay. So you grew up there?
No, we moved downstate here when I was 7 or 8 years old.
Okay.
Primarily, employment was hard to find up at that time in the Upper Peninsula. So my father came down to the Detroit area to seek employment and ended up building a house in West Bloomfield Township, and we moved to that house in West Bloomfield.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving around. You've got to find a job.
That's it.
Got to have a job. All right. So do you ever get back up to the UP?
I do. I inherited part of that family dairy farm.
Excellent.
And I own it to this day, so I go out back to Chassell many times a year.
Got it. So early life in the UP, and then down here. When you lived up there, family, friends, what was life like at your home?
It was pretty much a middle-class home in town. They just tore the old homestead down to build a dollar store, but but like I said, my father had been born and grew up on a farm there. My grandmother and uncles lived on the farm there, which was kind of a unusual experience, and it's probably what kind of piqued my interest and respect of history, because it was a rural farm without electricity.
Ooh, yeah.
So there were a lot of things about being on the farm that probably many generations before me had only experienced. You know, like a wood cook range in the kitchen, no electricity, kerosene lamps, an outhouse.
Outhouse.
Yeah. So
that's real back to the land.
it is.
For most of known history, that's how people did it.
Yeah.
Before we had plugs in the wall.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, wasn't any television. You listened to the radio at night.
Yep, exactly. So you have brothers and sisters?
I have an older brother and an older sister.
Okay.
Both of them live up in Elk Rapids, Michigan, which is north of Traverse City.
Nice community.
Very nice, yeah.
Sure. All right. So you're a boy. You moved down to West Bloomfield. Where'd you go to school?
Well, I started school in a little town called South Range up near home.
Sure.
And I always tell the story. It's kind of funny because the elementary school I started at was a relatively big elementary school. And we moved to West Bloomfield, and my elementary school in West Bloomfield was called Green School. It was a 2-room schoolhouse at the time.
Wow. So you'd think it would be the other way around.
Exactly, yeah.
Excellent. So when you Green School. So how old were you when you started at Green School?
I don't recall for sure. I was
Young.
Yeah.
All right. While you were young, were there people family or friends or teachers that had an influence on you, people that you remember or something like that?
Well, at that time, West Bloomfield was still, semi-rural community. I mean, there were still farmers that were serious about it.
Yep.
What was nice about it is my friends and I, we could we'd leave the house and we'd probably wander all over, just on our own through the better part of the day,
Yep.
And it was interesting.
It's good to be able to prowl around.
Oh, I think for a kid to go out and play in the woods and make forts
Yes, sir.
and everything,
Yes, sir.
it's special.
Indeed. Any teachers that had an influence on you when going to school?
No, not really. Later in high school, I had a teacher that was taught industrial arts that I think had a lot of influence on me. But,
Who was that?
Mr. Menard,
Menard, okay.
and he taught metal shop, wood shop. I think,
The hands-on stuff.
yeah, I think, and I don't think he taught drafting, but I had taken a drafting course too.
I wish that some of those things were taught these days too.
Well, a lot of those experiences in those classes I still use today.
Yeah.
It's just,
Sure.
especially wood shop, I think.
Got it. Did you have any hobbies or what kind of sports and stuff did you like when you were in school?
Well, I played basketball through junior high.
Okay.
I was a starting center at the time, but we had transportation issues, and I just couldn't make it to practice all the time, and so I gave that up.
Yeah.
I wanted a car. My family, if you wanted something, you earned it.
You earned it.
So I got a part-time job. I started working, doing lawns and things when I was about 14 years old, and when I earned enough money, I bought myself a car. So.
There you go. So you're in West Bloomfield. You're having a good time. You're in high school now. West Bloomfield High, I presume. You graduated from there in what year?
1968.
68, okay. Maybe you're a young fellow compared to me. I'm Ferndale at 66.
Okay.
So it's pretty much the same. All right. Did you like school? High school?
No, I wasn't a good student. I'll admit that. School was not my favorite thing to do. I had other ideas in life, I guess.
Got that.
It's kind of funny later on, when you're in school, you sometimes wonder, why do they teach that? I'll never use that again in my life. And later in life, I found there were a lot of those things I did end up needing to know and use.
It's funny about that, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's as though they knew.
Yeah.
Yep, we didn't know. What did you enjoy doing other than school?
Hunting. I enjoyed hunting a lot.
So you're out in the woods.
Yeah, and at that time, it was still my favorite thing to hunt at that time was pheasant, when there were still pheasant populations.
Yep.
And I really enjoyed pheasant hunting.
Locally or?
Oh, sure. Back then, like I said, West Bloomfield was rural enough that I could just grab my shotgun and
Go
walk out the door and across the street, and me and my friends would go pheasant hunting.
Probably fewer kids take their shotgun in West Bloomfield and walk out of the street now.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
I think it's probably unwise.
Yeah. Actually, when I go to West Bloomfield now, I see I don't recognize any of the West Bloomfield that was there when I was a kid.
Exactly right. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to wind up the young you with a vision of you walking through the fields, carrying a couple of pheasants and your shotgun over your shoulder and smiling because you actually hit a couple. That's a good thing. And then in a minute or two, we'll come back. We'll take a look at you as a young adult and figure out the influences that started to continue to make you the guy you are today. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks. We'll be right back. Okay, so let's say you graduated from West Bloomfield High School. What'd you do next?
As like a lot of kids, I didn't know what I wanted to do next when I got out of high school. And back then, employment is kind of like it was today. You could get a job pretty easy. It wasn't hard to find a job. And I worked in a couple small factories and things like that, and realized that wasn't where I envisioned my rest of my life, working a hot press in the back of a big factory. So
Yes, sir.
I started looking at other things, but Then I got involved with the Farmington Township Fire Department, which of course is now Farmington Hills. A friend had been a volunteer, and I became a volunteer, and I really enjoyed my time with the fire department also. I found that pretty exciting things to do. You know.
What did you do as a volunteer?
I was a firefighter. By the time I resigned, I was a lieutenant.
Okay.
But, just responded to fires and what we used to call resuscitator runs, which basically were your heart medicals, stop breathing.
Right. Now, that's a life career there, getting involved in firefighting, and that's something did you stay with that fire?
No, I didn't. When I got married and we moved to Oxford, that's when I resigned from the fire department there. And when I first arrived here, I was thinking about volunteering again, and I went to the fire department here in town and inquired, and at that time they told me they had a full roster, that they weren't looking for any volunteers.
Okay, so then you were a firefighter, I guess. You came out to Oxford. You didn't want to drive to Farmington Hills. That'd be a heck of a hike from here every day. Yeah. So what'd you do when you got out to Oxford? And you married, right? You and your brother.
Right. By that time, I was employed at the sheriff's department.
Okay.
And what happened, of course, when I hired with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office, there's a year of probation. Yep. My wife and I were engaged, but I didn't want to get married until I was sure I had a job. And so we waited that 1 year or so. In 1973, we got married, and then we moved.
I'm sure she appreciated the fact that her husband was gainfully employed. Yeah. That's a pretty important thing.
Yeah, today it might be.
Yes, indeed. So you're out here, and now you're involved in the Oakland County Sheriff's Department.
I've been retired from there for 16 years now.
Now, on the County Sheriff's Department, tell me about that. Was it a good place to work, and did you have any people in your life there who were influential on you? People who gave you some guidance, or?
Oh, sure. When I started at Oakland County, I kind of describe it as being a kind of rough and ready department here. Okay. There's the officers today have a lot of tools that we didn't have back then. We didn't even have portable radios, so when you got out of your patrol car, you were out of communication with everybody. A lot of the senior officers were World War II and Korean War veterans.
Sure.
They were, I would describe them as being brave, almost in some cases to the point of almost carelessness. That there wasn't too much that fazed them after their previous experiences. And sometimes it could be actually kind of scary working with them. But
if you've been through a war, there's nothing that could. Let's just go do it.
And my sergeant on my shift was Jim Stites, who lived here in Oxford. He had a house on Stony Lake Park there. Mm-hmm. He had a house right there, and I'd say he was a big influence. He was a really, really good person to work for. And
how so?
He just had common sense. You know, he didn't do things. I think everything he did was from experience and things that he thought through. He made thoughtful decisions most of the time. He wasn't a person who would fly off the handle. He was very patient. So.
And how did that affect you?
Well, I think you had the confidence as an officer when you went out on the road that the sergeant behind you was gonna back you up and take care of you. And what he always said, if you have a problem or you think there's going to be a problem, give me a call and we'll straighten it out. He says, but don't lie to me. Just tell me the truth. What happened? Yep. And that's the way he ran his shift. And I think that you had that confidence of him supporting you, and I think that made a big difference.
Pretty strong thing when you need. Or you're in a role where you need to count on your, fellow workers, and you've got a guy like that who's got your back.
Oh, sure. And, you're even as a trained officer, not everything comes out the way you expect things to come out.
I've heard that.
And so, knowing you'll have that support. Yep. If you do make a mistake, you just admit you made the mistake and why you did it. And if you, as long as it was somewhat reasonable why you made your mistake, it was good. You weren't punished for it. He wanted you to, I think he encouraged you to make a decision. He didn't want you ever to be standing there wondering what you should do, that you should be able to make a decision and able to support why you made that decision.
Yeah, that's a strong skill.
Yeah.
So how long were you involved with Oakland County Sheriff's Department?
Just short of 34 years.
So you put a lot of time.
Yeah, actually, I worked part-time for 2 years after I retired, so it's probably actually more than 35 years altogether counted.
What kind of roles or job responsibilities did you have as a sheriff's deputy?
Well, I started out as a patrolman, and it was interesting that as the new guy, I was kind of like a utility man for when other officers in other patrol districts had a day off and they needed somebody to fill in, I was the guy. And so I got to learn the county pretty quick, all from east to west and north to south.
I bet so. Work with a lot of different other officers,
Oh, yeah.
lots of different styles.
Yeah, in the department was not real big at that time. Not like now. I think there are over 1,200 employees, and they weren't anywhere near that when I started. But
Did you consider it a good job?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
This pay was decent. The benefits weren't always as good. You know, we used to complain because a lot of times you could go over to Pontiac Motors and hire it and have better benefits than some of the benefits we were getting at the time. But you know, that eventually changed too. And actually, by the time I retired, we had very good benefits.
Excellent. So what you were on the road? What other roles did you have in the department?
I was on the road patrol for 12 years. Then I was a patrolman investigator assigned to the Detective Bureau for a year.
Okay.
Then after that, I was promoted to the Arson Unit in 1985.
Arson's a different world. You're not law enforcing. You're doing detective work, trying to figure it out, right?
Correct.
How'd you get involved in that, and what did you think about what you were doing?
Well, I think it was partly it was my interest from when I had been a volunteer firefighter. I kind of knew how things, you know, went. And I remember as a volunteer, we had one fire that I was really, really suspicious of. I thought
Okay.
it wasn't adding up. There was something definitely wrong with this fire. And, you know, we had one of the old-time fire chiefs and, don't worry about it. You know, that's not your concern. Just go ahead and clean up and do your thing. And,
Yes, sir.
and it just always bothered me that I was suspicious about that fire, which was a pretty big dollar loss, and that really nothing was done about it.
Didn't smell right.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So then you were in arson. You were trying to figure out what the cause of fires were. How long did you have that role?
I did that role for 21 years.
That's a long time. I'm guessing you could get pretty good at figuring out what went wrong in 21 years.
Well, it's sometimes you know before you walk in the house you have a high idea just from looking at it on the outside, and then other times you'll have a fire that should be really, really simple to figure out, and you just end up sitting there scratching your head and you never can figure out what happened.
So what's the goal of an arson investigator?
Primarily what we did is because a good share of the fire departments in the areas that the Sheriff's Department patrol were volunteer fire departments, part-time employees. So what we did is the arson unit provides the expertise for any fire department that wants assistance in determining the origin and cause of a fire.
So because you were a county, you were a resource that smaller departments or other departments could use to help them figure out what the heck's going on.
Right.
All right. Did you like to work?
Oh, I loved it.
Did you?
Yeah.
What did you like about it?
It was what they were primarily were what's sometimes called cradle to grave investigations. Because when you originally start out, you don't even know if you're dealing with a crime. Because it could very well be an accidental fire and then you're done with it. But then if you determine that it was an incendiary fire, then you would have to investigate, see who might be suspects, see if you could develop evidence for a case that could be presented to the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office.
I imagine you had some stories.
Yeah, if you took all the fires that I investigated or was involved in investigating over the years, it would make quite a disaster movie.
I imagine it would. You ever think about writing a book?
Well, I am kind of writing a book right now, but we'll have to see how that comes out.
All right.
But I'm writing a book based on history. With my interest in history, right now I'm researching and I'm trying to write a book about the Polly Ann Railroad. So.
Really?
Yeah.
I think that's probably something we should explore. All right. Well, we'll take a break for a little bit, and we'll come back, and we'll see what we can find out about that. All right?
Okay.
Thanks very much.
All right.
All right. Okay, we're back. I didn't ask about something that I should have. You and your bride moved out to Oxford, you said, but I haven't talked to you much about your wife. You're married. Do you have any kids?
We have 2 daughters.
Okay. Tell me about your family.
My oldest daughter is married and lives in Bloomfield Township.
Okay.
She has 3 children, a girl and 2 boys.
So you're a grandpa.
Yeah, and then my youngest daughter, she lives in Rhode Island,
Okay.
and she has a grandson.
It's a little further drive.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yes, sir. And how old are the grandkids?
The little Charlie out in Rhode Island just turned 4 at the end of last month.
Good. Excellent. All right. So you're a grandpa times 4.
That's correct.
It's a good job.
Yeah.
Good. It has good pay, doesn't it?
Well, you know, and I'll tell you what's really nice is you enjoy modern convenience, and what's great is my daughter's really good about calling us on FaceTime, so we get to see him a couple times a week and talk to him and see what he's up to and
stay connected even though you're far away.
Right.
Excellent. All right. Well, on the break, you were telling me about something that you made me smile, so I'll ask you about it. You said something about your dad when he was young and how we sometimes don't think of our parents as young people. Tell me about that story. Or tell them about that story.
Late in life, he started reminiscing about things that he had done, and
Sure.
and I was a little surprised. He told me the story about when him and his best friend Rudy, during the Depression, they decided they wanted to try hoboing. So they came up with a plan, and they jumped on a freight train there in Chassel, and they made it all the way out to the West Coast. And he said when they got there, they were out of money. They only had enough money to buy a loaf of bread to split between the 2 of them. Mm-hmm. And so they decided to come back, and they hopped freight trains all the way back to Michigan.
That's a long way to go.
Oh yeah, and he said when they got back to Michigan, he said it was right in the middle of a snowstorm, and they were riding in an open gondola car on the train.
Ooh. I'm thinking he was glad to be home.
I think so.
That's
So
right.
the wood stove probably looked pretty good that night.
I bet so. Good. Okay. Well, the last section here, we talk about the last 10 or 15 years of your life. Tell us what you've been doing. You were in the fire department, or you county sheriff, and how did that wind down, and what have you done since then?
Well, you know, I had started with the sheriff's office in 1972, so by the time I was starting to get worried because I really did enjoy my job and I didn't feel like retiring, but all the people that I had worked with had retired over the years and were gone. And,
Sure.
And so I was concerned. Well, my brother had been a police officer also, and I told him, I expressed my concerns. I said, I'm just not ready to retire yet. And he says, don't worry. He says, the day you decide to retire, it's going to hit you. And I said, okay. So one day I'm at home with my bride, and we're sitting watching television in the living room. It's Saturday night. And sitting next to each other, and I caught myself. I was planning my whole schedule for Monday on Saturday night, and I thought, it's time to go. That's enough. Yeah, when you're spending your weekend worrying about your work week, it's time to go.
There is a message somewhere.
Yeah.
Note to self: we got to cut this out.
Yeah.
So, did she appreciate that?
I think so. She had planned on working for a couple more years herself, and I don't think she was enjoying when she was going to work and I was sitting on the deck with my morning cup of coffee reading the newspaper. But actually, she ended up the job she was working at. She was working at Marshall Fields, and they did away with that position, so she ended up getting a retirement a little bit before she had planned to.
Okay. So then you're no longer a county sheriff's deputy. So what did you do next, and why?
Well, over the years, I've had a lot of friends that were in private investigation business that I got to know. So one of them, on the day I retired, he asked me to go to work for him, being a private investigator for doing fire investigations for the insurance industry. And I told him I didn't think I was ready to go back to work, and he might want me to work more than what I wanted to work. So we worked out a deal, and I went to work for him. And then the ordinance position came up with the township, and I applied for that, and I had that position. Then Under Sheriff McCabe, who lives here in Oxford Township, he called me, and at that time the Sheriff's Department was absorbing Pontiac Police Department, and they had to do pre-employment background investigations on all their officers. So he asked me to come back part-time and do pre-employment background investigations. So I was beginning to get to the point where I had a part-time jobs, but I was working more hours than when I worked full-time. So
It sounds like
I had to cut back on those a little bit.
those things sneak up in you, don't they?
They do.
Right. Did you enjoy that kind of next set of work jobs?
I did, yeah. Yeah.
Now, were there people in your life then who had an influence either positively or negatively on you to help you be who you are?
The friend that had the private investigation company, I've known well, and he was a good example in giving some life lessons on how to handle things. So he gave some good guidance as far as being a private investigator.
I imagine he had a lot to say,
Yeah.
some of which you probably can't say now.
Well, his work experience was he had worked for Detroit Police Department before he started his private investigation company, so he had quite a career.
There might be stories there.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So since then, what have you been doing?
Like I said, I worked for Oxford Township for 10 years. Then I retired from that. I've been involved in the Historical Society, which I don't know if you're aware or not, it's the 50th anniversary of the Historical Society and the museum this year, so they're planning for that. And I'm also planning for another historic cemetery tour it's scheduled for October 2nd this year.
Tell us a bit about that. I am fascinated with that. I saw on your Facebook post some information about that. How did you get involved in doing that? It's very creative. I like that.
Well, I had originally gone to one of the cemetery tours put on by the Better Pontiac group at the cemetery in Pontiac, and I really found it intriguing. And I always thought Oxford's little cemetery there on Burdick, especially in the fall, is such a picturesque little site. So I started going around and just looking at who was buried there and see what I could find out in history about them, and I was really very surprised about some of the stories I found.
I bet. So then what do you do?
Well, I do the research, find out about their lives, and if there's some good stories there, I put them on the tour. And
So if I was on the tour, what would I see?
this year, it's going to be we're representing our first tour that we did a number of years ago, 5 years ago. And it'll be stories about the Oxford pioneers, what it was like when they got here, and being the very first settlers in the area, and the kind of difficulties and the things that they had to overcome to build the community of Oxford.
The kind of thing that you hope people will come and listen to it and appreciate what we have now.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And the last tour we did, some of the people there, they really enjoyed it, and they were really inquisitive about the other tours we had done before that because they enjoyed it so much.
Sure.
So I thought it's been 5 years since we did the original tour, so it's probably could throw it again.
Circle back. Excellent. All right. Well, I appreciate so much you taking the time to tell us a bit about who you are and all the things you've done. I imagine you've got about 500 good stories to tell. We don't have time to go into that, but I wanted to thank you for giving us a sense for the kinds of things that help you become the guy you are. What do you think about the future? What are you up to in the future?
Well, like I said, I have the farm up north. I've been working on slowly remodeling that and kind of bringing it up into better condition. Right now, my wife and I are house shopping. We're looking at houses, and we want to stay in the Oxford area here where we can continue to be involved in the community.
Good.
So we're pretty particular about what we're looking for. We haven't any luck finding it so far, but we intend to stay in the area.
Keep at it. Yeah. All right. Well, I want to thank you again. It's great to have met you. You've got a good story.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to it.
Lots of good stories. All right. Well, this is Chuck Cameron saying we hope you enjoyed this story too and Jim's life. And until next time, this is OCTV, the My Life program, and I hope you have a great life.